The West Valley Foundation is a nonprofit organization that promotes diversity, education, and honors the legacy of Cesar Chavez, a great American civil rights leader. The organization recently felt that it was important to bring to the forefront the hardships and challenges suffered by farm workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. So they commissioned me to produce a documentary called Essential Farm Workers. Farm workers now carry a letter that says they are as essential as medical professionals caring for the sick and dying. Farm workers represent a vital and important key link in America's food chain. The possibility the pandemic could interrupt the flow of food to Americans compelled our government to designate farm workers as essential. But the designation did not bring with it the resources to protect farm workers from the coronavirus.
There are varying levels of what happens during this pandemic. And what we found was we needed the agriculture supply chain to work. That means that even though a lot of us were staying home, and a lot of us were masking up and not going out, we still needed food to come our way. And that's where that's why the food workers or the field workers were so absolutely critical to what was going on. And I also commend our healthcare workers who have gone through so much. And as you may know, I had my own severe bout with COVID where I nearly died. And I cannot thank the healthcare workers who were there. But while I was there, they had me on a diet of vegetables and fruits. And those never would have gotten there without the farm workers at the first part of that food chain.
Without a doubt, the pandemic has done a number of things. It's shown some of the weaknesses of our country and some of the weaknesses of our own communities. But it also has shown who we really need. And the farm worker, without a doubt, we can't live, and I mean underline live, without them. One of the essential things of life is food. And they put that on our tables.
Doctors and nurses are essential workers. We honor them almost as if they were coming back for more, and I agree. What are we doing for farm workers? Absolutely nothing. Are we honoring them for putting food on our tables during this time and during this pandemic? No. I say shame on us. I say we take the opportunity to exalt them, to congratulate them, to show them how much we care for them and appreciate them, but not just in words and symbols, but to make sure they're getting paid, make sure they're safe, make sure they have nice homes, make sure they have all of those things that other essential workers have.
More than 500,000 farm workers, according to Purdue University, have tested positive for the virus. They are at higher risk of COVID exposure because they work close to each other. They share transportation, live in crowded and shared housing with limited access to health care. They have no sick leave, can't quarantine, and more likely to work after testing positive for COVID-19. It is also a hard-to-reach workforce, and that makes it difficult for health providers. Many farm workers fear potential repercussions from employers and the government.
Toda mi vida en el campo, en el circo. Nosotros somos la gente sufrida. Nomás mire todos los latinos cómo andamos en el campo, trabajando con el frío, con el calor, a veces faltos de alimento.
Un trabajador del campo es importante porque va a llevar la comida a las mesas de todos los ricos, de los millonarios y pobres.
Que si el mexicano no hace estos trabajos, un americano no creo que lo mire piscando aquí.
Es de andar agachados, pues andar hincados, de lo que sea. Si no te duele una cosa, te duele otra cosa.
El trabajo aquí es pesado, anda uno cargando 65 libras en la bolsa. Entrenar gente nueva no es fácil.
They have been considered essential workers, yes, but what are we giving back to them? What are we doing from my field? What are we doing with their mental health, for their well-being? There is a lot of depression, anxiety, fear of getting contacted, being very worried about one of their families or the elderly is getting sick and don't having access to health care, how to pay the bills if they get sick. What are we doing? If there are some health resources for them, they are far away. There is no transportation. The hours where clinics are open are not in alignment with their working hours of them. What are we doing as a society, as a healthcare workers, and as authorities to really provide these people with all the rights and express our gratitude for what they do for us?
Our farm worker has long been underserved, last ones at the table to receive benefits of any kind. So I think that through the efforts of this administration, they've been going to community health centers, making sure that because those farm workers attend and go to those health centers for other services, they have been able to get the vaccine because of those health centers that are serving those underserved communities. Well, the United Farm Workers, through their organization and community organization, they've been getting the word out to farm workers to get to these centers and get their vaccine, and they have done a great job through their organization and communication. It's been the way that they started from the very, very beginning to organize them to get better wages and better health services. They've done the same thing. They've been communicating through the union to get that word out, to get that vaccine, how important that is to keep them healthy, to keep our community healthy.
The headlines across the country reflect a fractured system unable to address the health care needs of farm workers during the pandemic. Millions are without health insurance, without protective gear, and fearful of losing their jobs because of their immigration status. A large number are undocumented immigrants, mostly from Mexico. Some have lived in the U.S. for decades. 10% of the farm workers are H-2A visa holders. It is a federal program farmers use to fill agricultural jobs.
There are buses at the border over in Yuma, and I've heard even to the point where people stay on this side overnight, and many times in their own cars, because they come over to pick the produce. And yet we don't recognize them as part of our society, as part of our country. And we abuse the immigrant. And if in any other world or any other country, whether we like it or not, it is the closest thing to the form of slavery than it was for the black community in the times of the plantations.
And slavery, you say, because of the conditions?
Slavery, because of the conditions they live under, because of the pay, and because they're exposed to chemicals that me and you would not allow our kids or our families to be exposed to the elements of summer and winter, where we are in our homes comfortably. They're out there picking our produce. So I think we've got to really wake up as a Latino community. We need to wake up and think through, how are we speaking out for immigrants? Are we speaking out for our farm workers who come in and out of our country? And then the question becomes, are we working with our farm workers that are U.S. citizens? You know, we have families that live off the farms that are second, third generation.
It's important to recognize that a lot of the farm workers in the fields are people who don't have legal status in this country. But they're damn essential to this country. We can talk about wages, we can talk about living conditions, we can talk about safety, but at the end of the day, we also have to talk about legal status. And that has to be at the top, because the majority of them, a great majority of them, are people who are either the sons and daughters of those who don't have documents or themselves don't have documents. I mean, think about it. We import thousands and thousands and thousands of workers to work in the fields. We can take care of the folks that are here without documents and give them legal status in a way that will improve their wages, will improve their conditions, will improve their safety. So I'm very much in favor of all of the things that are important to workers in general, but to farm workers in particular, and those who don't have legal status, we need to add that to the equation.
The designation of farm workers as essential brought to the forefront the efforts of one of America's great civil rights leaders, Cesar Chavez. Some 60 years ago, he dedicated his life to what he called la causa, the cause. He understood the value of the work of farm workers in the United States and the need to improve their quality of life and working conditions.
I wish the people knew how the farm worker lives. Si la gente se diera cuenta de cómo vive el trabajador campesino. I mean, if you knew the situation in which the farm worker finds himself, then they'd be in my shoes, en mis zapatos, peleando la misma causa, fighting for the same cause, la misma lucha, making the same struggle which we make now, peleando por la justicia social, fighting for social justice, justice for all farm workers, peleando por la justicia de todos los trabajadores campesinos. Not only for ourselves, no nomás para nosotros, not only for this generation, but for all generations to come. Para nuestros hermanos, hijos, our brothers and sons, para nuestras hermanas, hijas, our sisters and daughters, para el futuro, for the future which is coming to all our people, para que todos vivamos iguales, con los mismos derechos que tiene toda la gente, so that we can live in equality and have our own lives, the same rights that everybody has, like all the workers in the United States. Tener los mismos derechos de todos nuestros hermanos trabajadores aquí en los Estados Unidos. I really can't see how anybody can deny us justice. How they can deny us what we're fighting for. ¿Cómo espera alguno mantener y soportar a sus niños? How can someone hope to support their children and send them to school, mandarlos a la escuela, al colegio, to give them a place in this life, para que ellos puedan escoger su propio destino? Hope for the future.
So at the end of the day, I say to you, I say to the world, heed Cesar Chavez's words. Farm workers are important to this country. Let's make them important in pay. Let's make them important in living conditions. Let's make them important in safety, just the way we exalt them at this point in our lives. And never let them drop from that.
If Cesar Chavez will still be alive physically, because his spirit is very well alive, he will really be mad, but then he will really get involved. And that's what we need to do to better honor his legacy. Let's get involved. Because what he did 30 years ago is what we need to do now. So the label helps, but we go beyond that, please. Let's get involved. We all have skills. We always have something to give to our farm workers, not just receive the fruit of their work, of their labor. Let's give back. Let's be really part of the solution, and let's respect and honor with service, with gratitude, with respect to our farm workers.
In Arizona, I don't hear the governor's office worrying about getting the vaccine, for instance, to the farm workers. I don't hear about the testing that started to occur last year to see if folks had the COVID-19. So I think we have really, and Cesar would probably say that, we've gone backwards, not forwards, as it relates to how we treat the farm workers in our country.
The beginning of the pandemic, and we're about a year from that, is that we found that in many ways our urban Latino community was being forgotten. We weren't getting tests in, we weren't getting resources. And when you looked out even farther into our campesinos, the field workers, they weren't getting anything in the way of any COVID resources.
I think that Cesar Chavez saw that without the farm worker, there would be no food on anybody's table. And he saw them as a very essential part of our community. Pretty much like today, I think the COVID virus has highlighted our first responders. I mean, how essential. We wouldn't be able to be where we are today, starting to maybe turn the corner on this virus. But without the first responders, we wouldn't be there. And I think that Cesar saw the same thing in the farm workers. Without the farm workers, our country could not grow. There would be no food on our tables to eat.
Cesar Chavez showed that even the most meek and the most humble of people can have the force of a giant, the economic force, the heart, the soul, the ability to organize a group of silent workers who never knew how to fight for themselves, so he fought for them. And he changed that industry, and he got it to the point to where we had presidential candidates going into the fields to thank our farm workers. So I think he leaves a legacy that all of us will continue to live our lives, our children's lives, generations to come will stand on the shoulders of Cesar Chavez to make a fair and equitable and just workplace for our farm workers.
Through the efforts of such organizations as the West Valley Foundation, the legacy of Cesar Chavez and what he stood for is being preserved and promoted. Annually, the organization pays tribute to Chavez at a morning breakfast. The pandemic has prevented the foundation from having the event for 2 years.
When we started the West Valley Foundation, we started it in 1996. And the reason that we picked Cesar Chavez was because of his involvement in community and including people in everything that he did. And so we were very interested in keeping on that legacy of Cesar Chavez, and inclusion and diversity and people was what we wanted to emphasize. And through our efforts to create an event, we created a breakfast that we called the Cesar Chavez Breakfast. And we've been able to earn some money and give back to our community through scholarships and education. And that really is what we try to do.
I had the high privilege of, with Alfredo and Senator Manuel Peña's help, getting to know Cesar Chavez and had a chance to really figure out a few things about what inclusion is all about. I am honored, to be here with all of these distinguished folks. Any community that can produce a Brooklyn Ball is a community worthy of support and leadership. There is much going on, even in the midst of all of this madness, to be thankful for and grateful for. It was said earlier in this gathering, it would be important to know what Cesar Chavez would do, but he is gone. He is not gone. He lives here in the spirit of every human being sitting here who refuses to accept injustice and inequity as a way of life. It exists in everyone who believes that all the broken balls of this world are entitled to the best we can give them, so that they in fact can deliver back to us the gift that God gave them. His spirit lives. His spirit lives in all of us sitting here who believe we in fact can truly, not by slogans, but by our embracing of each other, really make America great again. And he exists, in my judgment, in the sense that we all understand that diversity is not only not an evil, it is probably the greatest gift we give each other, and it's the greatest gift we've given the world, a place where everyone can find a home. When I was young, Daniel, and actually at that time thin, that's a long time ago, John Kennedy said we should either learn to rid this country of all of its differences or learn to make it a safe place for diversity. Those of us who are here have chosen the latter. We must make this a safe place for diversity. But we will not do it by sitting idly by and assuming that if we do nothing, it will change for the better. Democracy has always been, it continues to be today, a participatory sport.
Cesar did the fast for 25 days in a little place in South Phoenix. That little place was Santa Rita Hall, and within it was a tiny little office. That was my office, and Cesar threw me out. So that he could sit there and not eat. I mean,
you know, Cesar would first of all, knowing his demeanor, he would be outraged because realistically, they're only considered essential because at the end of the day, if it wasn't for the farm workers, we wouldn't be buying produce and food for our families without them. The problem is that, and Cesar organized a union around this, is that when the crops are not around, then they're dispensable, so you don't need them at that point, right? Our country has done this to a number of, like it or not, immigrants that come in from a variety of different countries, but predominantly from Mexico. So the question for us right now in the pandemic is that we've not stopped eating, have we? We still eat tomates and lechuga and we celery, you know, whatever we're cooking. And it begs the question, well, who's doing that work? The farm workers.
Look, you have the opportunity to promote the most important or essential workers that feed you. Remember, every time you pick up a tomato, every time you get an orange, anytime you get lettuce, any of those, every day, remember farm workers and remember what you can do to make sure that they're treated with dignity and respect and equality. From now on, every time you eat, think about those who feed you and make sure they get treated like human beings and how essential that food is to you the way they are to you.
In giving of yourself, you will discover a whole new life full of meaning and love. We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others, for their sakes, and for our own. History will judge societies and governments, and their institutions, not by how big they are, or how well they serve the rich and the powerful, but by how effectively they respond to the needs of the poor and the helpless. The fight is never about grapes or lettuce. It is always about people.